D asked for Melchizedek. The best way for anyone to find out answers is to start by checking what is written in the Bible. So I'm going to search Melchizedek. We find that 11 times in the scriptures. Let's have a look at what is written. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. So here we have a manifestation of Melchizedek, and the significant part is that Abram tithed to him, which is then made mention of in the New Testament, showing that Melchizedek was greater than Abram. It's also significant that he brought bread and wine, because you know exactly what that is, don't you? And he was the priest. He was the priest of God Most High. So already we have a few references that, before we read anything else, potentially refer us to Jesus. In Psalm 110, verse 4, the Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, this is then quoted in Hebrews chapter 5, and I will read from verse 5. So also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, You are my son, today I have begotten you. As he also says in another place, You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. So now Melchizedek becomes an order of equivalent stature as Aaron. So we have the Levitical priesthood where Aaron was the first high priest. Now we have another priesthood, but it's in the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus became a high priest according to this order. For Jesus is written, You are a priest forever. Melchizedek was the priest of the Most High God. And then as we continue in verse 10 about Jesus is written, called by God as high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Then in chapter 6, verse 19, 20, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Jesus, having become high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And then in chapter 7, verse 1, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom Abram, well, here it says Abraham, but back then it was Abram, gave a tenth of all, first being translated King of Righteousness. Well, isn't that Jesus? And then also King of Salem, the Prince of Peace, the King of Peace. But listen what's more important here. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. Isn't that clear? I think you can't make it more clear than this. And then, now beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better, talking about Abram and tithing Melchizedek to Melchizedek, where mortal men receive tithes, but there he receives them, of whom it is witnessed that he lives. Even Levi, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. I hope you realize that here we are talking about stuff which are beyond the earthly realm.
Yeah.
Therefore, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise according to the order of Melchizedek, and not be called according to the order of Aaron? For the priesthood being changed, of necessity there is also a change of the law. For he of whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe, from which no man has officiated at the altar. Now let's move to verse 15. And it is yet far more evident if in the likeness of Melchizedek there arises another priest who has come not according to the law of fleshly commandment, but according to the power of an endless life. And it is repeated, for he testifies, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And it's repeated one more time, the Lord has sworn and will not relent, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. By so much more, Jesus has become a surety of a better covenant. That is, by being the high priest in the order of Melchizedek. So who is Melchizedek? I think it's commonly believed and accepted that Melchizedek is the pre-birth of Jesus person of Christ in the eternity. I'm not going to say in the Old Testament, because actually Abraham was not even in the Old Testament. Melchizedek was clearly before the Old Testament and beyond the Testaments. It's over. So there was a person who was the high priest of God before the Old Testament. He was Melchizedek. Then someone was filled with the Spirit of God to become Jesus, born through Virgin Mary, so that he could become that high priest of God in that realm of eternity from which Melchizedek already was. So Jesus is the earthly, physical, man-like manifestation of Melchizedek in the heavenly places. Because Melchizedek has no genealogy, no father, no mother. He's not a human being. So very much like there is no real, physical, visible, man-made tabernacle in heaven, but actually there is a tabernacle. And because I think I've never done with you the teaching on Hebrews chapter 9, let's quickly remember what is written in Hebrews chapter 9 about. Then indeed, even the first covenant had ordinances of divine service and the earthly sanctuary, the tabernacle. For a tabernacle was prepared. And here are the descriptions. But Christ came, well, let me read here. While the first tabernacle was still standing, it was symbolic for the present time, in which both gifts and sacrifices are offered, which cannot make him who performed the service perfect in regard to conscience, concerned only with foods and drinks, various washings, and fleshly ordinances imposed until the time of Reformation. But Christ came as high priest of the good things to come, with a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation. Not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, he entered the most holy place once and for all, having obtained eternal redemption. So basically, there is a tabernacle in heaven, not made by hands. There is a Holy of Holies where Jesus entered. In fact, that's where he's seated right now. We read that Jesus sat at the right of God, and we know where Jesus sat. He sat on the mercy seat, as we call it, in the Holy of Holies. Now, the mercy seat in the Hebrew Old Testament was called kaporet, and that kaporet has been translated in Greek as helasterion, and the helasterion means the place where mercy is applied, hence the mercy seat. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that Melchizedek comes from that realm, and then Jesus appeared in an earthly form so that he could become, in the eternal realm, the high priest. Mm-hmm. But we see that there are two high priests only. On earth, the Levitical priesthood, and in heaven, Jesus, the high priest. But it's not just Jesus. He is Jesus in an order, Melchizedek. So really, you have two high priests, Melchizedek and then Aaron. Melchizedek was in heaven, and then Aaron became on the earth. Melchizedek was in the tabernacle of heaven, then Aaron became a physical man during the old covenant. In the new covenant, things are restored by the death and resurrection of Jesus, and he goes up to fulfill his eternal destiny for which he came to the earth. What is that? To be the priest forever of the Most High God. But who is the priest forever? It's Melchizedek.